Hello, everyone. This is Pal Ponder on Weather coming at you with another video. In this update, we're going to be talking about the hurricane outlook for 2020, as I'm expecting a very busy season this year. So, before I do get started, if you do like weather related content, please subscribe to my channel and definitely share with your friends on social media. All right, so let's get started. So let's first start off with the ENSO Outlook, and as you can kind of see where we are now, we've been predominantly in what they call an ENSO neutral, if not an ENSO El Nino pattern for the past couple of months, and I actually expect that to continue as we go deeper into spring. But as we start going into the summer months, we see a lot of the models kind of transitioning to more of a neutral into a La Nina pattern as we go deeper into the summer months into the fall. If you take a look at the latest CVS V2 model, now this model is actually even pretty bullish. It's got pretty much all the ensemble members going negative, if not strongly negative. And now, if this would actually transpire, this would be a medium to strong La Nina for about a year, year and a half. So I don't actually, buy this particular model. This one's been fairly bullish on all aspects, but it kind of more of a medium in the road that La Nina is going to be in the cards for the summer months. As we take a look at the sea surface temperatures right now, you can see they're pretty warm across the main development region of the Atlantic and especially the Gulf of Mexico. But you can see out in the Pacific, we've got well above average sea surface temperatures, but we're starting to see some cooling off the West Coast, and we're starting to see some of that cooling kind of dip into the mix here, causing some of that upwelling. Now that would actually lower the trade winds and cause less shear over the Atlantic. It would create that above average season, especially with these higher than normal sea surface temperatures. So as we take a look at the latest hurricane outlook from the Colorado University, they're actually calling for 16 named storms this season. Now, on average, there's about 12.1. So this is the latest over the last 30 years. And as you can see, this ends in 2010. So whatever happens this year will calculate towards next year. And this 10-year-old average will pretty much probably go up because we've had some pretty bullish years over the last 10 years. So I expect this 12.1 average to go up next year. But overall, we're looking at 16 named storms with about 80 days of named storm activity, and about 8 of those transitioning into a hurricane, with about 4 of those for a major hurricane, and about 2 to 4 of those storms potentially making landfall in the United States. So if we take a look at some of the names for 2020, and a lot of people don't know, these actually recycle every 6 years. Now, if you have a major storm like Hurricane Katrina, for example, that was actually retired and it doesn't get recycled. But if it becomes just like a tropical storm, it doesn't do much damage. That name actually repeats itself every 6 years. So you can see the names they have picked out this year, essentially from Arthur all the way to Wilford. Now, if we just kind of zoom in and take a look at more closer in of the Gulf and the Atlantic, and you can see well above average sea surface temperatures, and this is the latest outlook as of April the 6th. Now, these Gulf of Mexico temperatures are actually running about 3 degrees above normal. So this is well capable of actually even producing a tropical storm even right now, even though the season doesn't actually start until June 1st. So if you look in some of the main development region of the Atlantic, you can see a lot of oranges. So this model on the right, and this is only in Celsius and not Fahrenheit, but it shows you a lot of above average sea surface temperatures would be plenty of fuel to the fire to have storm activity. Now, if we take a look at into time, this is the latest CVS V2 model for August, September, and October. Some of the main, the higher months, the peak development time frame would imply a lot of upwelling going on, and this would definitely be an active season with a lot of cooling in the Pacific, and this would have less trade winds, less shear over the Atlantic, would be more susceptible for storm development. So above average time frame in the Atlantic, but actually below average season in the Pacific. So now, if we take a look at how we came actually up with this outlook of 16 named storms, we took a look at the last abundance years of all the sea surface temperatures and going in between potentially La Nina pattern. We came up with 1995, 96, 98, 99, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2007, 2010, 13, and 17. And so if you average all those analog years up, we came up with 16.5 named storms. So, and overall, 9 of those were hurricanes, and 4.4 were actually intense hurricanes. So, some of the seasons that actually stand out were 2017 and 2010, where they had a lot of hurricanes, and obviously 2005 was the biggest year on record with 28 storms. So that was an incredible year. But some of these other years do stand out. So overall, an above average season looking more likely coming up for this hurricane season. So if we take a look at the latest European ensemble models from July, as we start getting into more of those active months, as far as the precipitation anomalies, we see coming off the African coast of the Cape Verde season showing we already have those above average sea surface temperatures right now. So we've got plenty of fuel coming off the coast here. And as these waves come off, this would imply they would actually be able to hold together and make it potentially into the Caribbean and eventually get closer into the United States. Now, if we take a look at August, it still shows a pretty higher likelihood of these waves holding together coming off the African coast into August. And even if we extend it into September, still shows a pretty active time frame. Now, granted, this is 5 months out, but kind of shows you of a lot of activity potentially coming off Africa. Now, like I said, the hurricane season essentially runs from June 1st all the way to November 30th. But this is a timestamp, and basically the bullseye zone would be essentially from August 15th to October 15th. That's when predominantly most of these storms occur. Actually, about 62% of the storms occur within those 60-day time spans. So that's when things could potentially be more into a La Nina pattern and be more active in the Gulf and the Atlantic. Now, if we take a look at some of these origin points and how these come to fruition, now this is April, and I showed you the 3 degrees above average sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, what's actually going to happen is there could be some storms in April. It's not out of the question. We start to look at potentially cold fronts, like we're going to have a major cold front come through next week, and a lot of that could stall out in the Gulf. So we start looking at closer into the Gulf or close in development, especially as we get into June. We start looking at these fronts that can make it all the way into the Gulf and potentially stall. On the southwest side, that's typically where a low pressure system can form and spin up into a tropical activity. So we definitely keep an eye out in the Gulf closer in as hurricane season starts off, but we take you through time of the points of origin, essentially from 1851 all the way to 2015, shows you pretty active closer in the month of June. And then as we start transitioning into July, and especially as we get into the middle of July, we start kind of transitioning. We can see the dots kind of lighting up. We have a lot more activity. Now we have more activity further out towards Africa, into the Caribbean. And some of these storms pull out, but some of them have made the trek and make it all the way into the Gulf and potentially up into the United States. But as we go deeper into time, especially as we hit that sweet spot of August 15th timeframe, you can see the Pacific typically gets active by then, but most of those go out to sea. But you can see the Cape Verde season gets active by that time frame and it has a lot of warm water to work with. And as we kind of take you through time, the end of July have more dots, and especially um, by the middle of August here, we start to see an abundance of activity, and that's when the season starts to really ramp up. And towards the end of August, and especially prime time would be September 10th time frame, as we see a lot of dots, and it could pretty much happen anywhere. And that's where it's pretty hard to find not to have a storm in the Atlantic by then. So we're going to be watching this area, but you can kind of see as we transition into some of the higher peak uh, time frames, as a lot of dots of origin start to light up, and we have more potential storms hitting the United States. And especially as we go into October, again, the points of origin are still very high all the way through October 15th timeframe, but they definitely start to kind of tail off as we get towards the end of October, and especially end of November. And that's when kind of more or less fall sets in. We start getting these cold fronts that make it all the way down into the Gulf. And then that's when it actually more like as a deterrent, because hurricanes don't like cold air. So that's when typically most of these storms kind of go out to sea, and that's where you can see and some of these tracks. And especially as we get into November, it's pretty difficult for a storm to even make landfall in the United States by then. So I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to like this video, and definitely if you found value, please consider subscribe to my channel and catch me in the next video where I protect you before and after the storm.